Which is better, the Motorola Moto G Power or the LG Stylo 6? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. Hi everyone, this is Kevin here, coming at you with my comparison between the Moto G Power and the LG Stylo 6. Now both of these devices are being offered by a variety of different carriers, and technically, these two phones do compete against each other because they are in the same price range. Now, I do recommend that you go over to whatever carrier you use that does offer these phones and see what the various deals are that they're offering, because one month they might have a certain device on sale, and then the next month a different device is on sale. So my point is that you should go over, see what deals are being offered, and then take that into account when deciding which of these two phones to go with. But with that being said, let's dive into the various specifications and go over what's different and what's the same. Now with the Moto G Power, we're getting a very large display at 6.4 inches. But with the LG Stylo 6, we have an even bigger display at 6.8 inches. So you can see side by side with these two phones, the Stylo 6 certainly does have the bigger display of the two, and with that, you're going to be able to see a lot more content. But in addition to that, this phone will be better for watching video content because you will get a more immersive experience. Now with both phones, we are getting IPS LCD displays at 1080p. With the Moto G Power, we're getting a PPI of 399, whereas with the LG Stylo 6, we're getting a PPI of 395. With the Moto G Power, we're getting a 19:9 aspect ratio, so it is narrow but tall. But with the LG Stylo 6, we're getting a 20.5:9 aspect ratio, so it's even more narrow and more tall. In addition to that, with the Moto G Power, we're getting an 83% screen-to-body ratio, and with the LG Stylo 6, we're getting an 82.5% screen-to-body ratio. So both of these phones definitely have big displays that are good for content consumption. They also both look really good. Now I do feel like in general the Moto G Power is a bit brighter than the LG Stylo 6. But with that being said, the Stylo 6 does not necessarily have a bad display. You know, both of these phones are going to be very good choices when it comes to getting a good looking display. Now up top here, there are some very big differences. So with the Moto G Power, we have a hole punch for the front facing camera, and it is situated off to the top left of the phone. Whereas with the LG Stylo 6, we're getting a water drop notch for the front facing camera, and it is in the center here. So I personally prefer the form factor of the Moto G Power, but that's my personal preference. I'm really curious to know what you think. Another difference too is that the front facing camera with the Moto G Power is 16 megapixels, whereas with the LG Stylo 6, we're getting 13 megapixels. Now internally, with both phones, we're getting 64 gigabytes of storage, and we're also getting micro SD card expansion. So it's very nice to see that we are getting a generous amount of storage with both phones. There's no wireless charging with either of these two devices, but they do both feature fingerprint sensors on the back. So we'll give that a try right now. Let's start with the Moto G Power. Nice and quick. Try out the LG Stylo 6. Decently quick. Let me do that one more time. Might have gotten a bad reading. Yeah, it's a little on the slower side really with the Stylo 6, but it's not so slow that it's not usable. But definitely the Moto G Power does have the faster fingerprint sensor of the two. Now neither of these two phones have face unlock, so if you do want face unlock, you are going to have to look for a different device. Now taking a look at the back of the two phones, they both have triple camera setups. So with the Moto G Power, we're getting a 16 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. Whereas with the LG Stylo 6, we're getting a 13 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, and a 5 megapixel depth sensing camera. Now from my experience of using both of these phones, I feel like the Moto G Power does take the better photos and videos of the two. That being said though, I'm actually decently impressed with the results from the Stylo 6. Now to learn more about the photo and video quality from these phones, I do recommend checking out the individual review videos that I did because they both have a lot of different samples to check out. Now here's how things look through the camera apps on both phones. This is with the standard camera, the main camera on both. Then from there you can switch over to the ultra wide angle cameras in the two phones. And it looks like the Stylo 6 does fit a bit more content into the frame. but in general, things do look a bit more clear with the Moto G Power. Then from there, you can switch over to portrait mode on both phones, which does blur out the background. And then with the Moto G Power, we are getting the macro camera, which is something that we don't have with the LG Stylo 6. So you can get really close up for nice, detailed photos. And then here's how things look with the front-facing cameras on both devices. Again, the Moto G Power does take the better photos and videos with the front-facing camera of the two phones. I've just got to give you my honest thoughts about that, that's for sure. But it is nice though that we do get portrait mode with the front cameras on both phones. That's great. I know that that's really popular as people really love to blur out the backgrounds on their various pictures. Now with the Moto G Power, we're getting 4GB of RAM in the Qualcomm Snapdragon 665, compared to the LG Stylo 6, where we're getting 3GB of RAM in the MediaTek Helio P35. Now, Motorola really made a great decision by giving this phone 4GB of RAM, and also the Snapdragon 665 is quite a powerful processor, so I'm surprised that they even put that processor in this phone. But I did run a benchmark test comparing these two devices, and I'll show you the scores right now from that. And you can see here that we do have quite a big difference with the two scores. So with the Moto G Power, I got a single core score of 304 and a multi-core score of 1309, compared to the LG Stylo 6, where I got a single core score of 170 and a multi-core score of 948. Also, taking a look at these two displays head on here, this is a good opportunity for you to really get a good idea of how much brighter the Moto G Power's display is. Now on both phones, I do have the brightness set to 100%, and you can see though, side by side here, that the G Power does have the brighter display of the two. Now I have brought this up in other comparisons I've done in the past, and some people have mentioned in the comments that my LG Stylo 6 must have some issue with it being so dim. And no, there's no issue. This is how it is. It is a bit dimmer than other phones out there, but if you were to just look at the LG Stylo 6 by itself, you wouldn't necessarily think that it has a dim display. It's just that when you put it next to phones that have a brighter display, it does look decently dim. I don't think it's something that's a deal breaker, but I did want to point that out here. Another difference between these two phones is that with the Moto G Power, we're getting 4K video recording with the rear camera and 1080p up front. And with the LG Stylo 6, video recording maxes out at 1080p, so you can't take 4K video with this phone. Another difference is the battery capacity. Now, the various Moto G Power phones do have a reputation of giving you very good battery capacity, and that trend does continue here with the Moto G Power 2020 model. But with this phone, we are getting a beefy 5,000 mAh internal battery compared to the LG Stylo 6, which does still give us a big battery, but it is a bit smaller at 4,000 mAh. Now, one of the biggest benefits of having a really large battery like what we're getting with the Moto G Power, in addition to just giving you good battery life, is that as the battery does degrade over time, which is something that happens with every smartphone, it is going to be a bit less noticeable with the Moto G Power. So my point is that if you're getting really incredible battery life from the beginning, in a year from now, the battery life might not be quite as good, but it's still going to be on par, if not maybe even slightly better than many other brand new phones. So if you're looking for a device that will give you the most longevity, then I feel like the Moto G Power is certainly a phone that you might want to consider. Now, as far as the software goes, both phones do feature Android 10. With the Moto G Power, we do have a near stock variant of Android here on the phone. And then with the LG Stylo 6, we are getting LG Skin. Now, I don't really mind LG Skin personally, but if that is something that you care about, maybe you're a big fan of stock Android, then you might really want to consider getting the Moto G Power out of these two phones. But now that we've gone over the major specifications of the two devices, let's take a closer look at the hardware. Now, I already talked quite a bit about the front panels here, and in general, I do prefer the design of the Moto G Power. First reason is that we're getting smaller bezels, but the second reason is that I do prefer having that hole punch instead of the notch in the middle. Now, taking a look at the left side of both devices, you can see with the Moto G Power, we just have the slot for the microSD card and SIM card, whereas with the LG Stylo 6, with the volume up, volume down, we have the Google Assistant button, which I feel like personally is pretty pointless, and then we have the slot for the microSD card and SIM card. Then on the right of both phones, on the Moto G Power, we have the volume button and power button, and then with the LG Stylo 6, we just have the power button. Then taking a look at the top of both devices, they both have the noise canceling microphone. And then on the bottom, there are some pretty big differences. Now, both phones do feature a 3.5mm headphone jack, they both have a microphone, they both have a speaker, and they both have a USB-C port for charging and data transfer. Now, one difference is that with the Moto G Power, we do have stereo audio. So audio not only comes out of the bottom speaker, but also the top when you're listening to music or watching videos, for example. So that does make this phone a bit louder when it comes to speaker quality. And you don't get that with the LG Stylo 6. But with the LG Stylo 6, hence its name, one of the core features of this phone is that we do get a stylus. So you just pop the stylus out, and then from there, you can write different notes. You can see I was already writing a lot of notes here on the phone. So let me erase a little bit of this. You can type, you can draw, you can then exit out and go into the actual operating system. And then you can just use the stylus for general navigation. So I definitely think it is nice to have. It's definitely not as advanced as the type of stylus that you would get with the various Galaxy Note phones, for example. But still, for what it is, I think it's totally good and useful, and I'm glad it's here. Now, for certain people, the stylus might be a bit of a gimmick, so you do need to think about whether or not you think it actually will help you. But if you think it's something that you think you would use, or maybe you eventually want to get a Galaxy Note, but you don't feel like spending that kind of money right now, and you want to at least prove to yourself that you can incorporate using a stylus into your mobile experience, then I definitely think it is a useful feature to have with the LG Stylo 6. And that's probably really the only selling point that this phone has over the Moto G Power. And then taking a look at the back sides of both phones, there are some pretty big differences as far as the color goes. They're both reflective, but we are getting more of a rainbowy, brighter color with the Stylo 6 out of the two devices. But both phones do have the camera modules on the back, and they have the fingerprint sensors. Let's now do a speed test comparison between these two phones. So we're gonna first pull up the camera app. So 1, 2, 3, go. And it looks like the Moto G Power is a lot quicker at pulling up the camera than the LG Stylo 6. Let's now go to Google Chrome. 1, 2, 3, go. And again, the Moto G Power was first at pulling up Chrome compared to the Stylo 6. And again, you can see in the side-by-side how much brighter the display is with the Moto G Power compared to the Stylo 6. And that definitely has to be due to the G Power having a better quality IPS LCD display of these two phones. But let's now go to yahoo.com. 1, 2, 3, go. Looks like the Moto G Power is a little bit quicker at pulling up the website. Let's now go to engadget.com. 1, 2, 3, go. And Moto G Power was quicker at pulling up Engadget. You can also see scrolling is pretty smooth on the Moto G Power. And it's smooth as well with the Stylo 6. So both phones do have good optimization when it comes to browsing the web. And it does definitely seem like the LG Stylo 6 can fit a lot more of a web page feed into the frame, which is another benefit of having it have a display that's as large as it has. Let's now go to this video. 1, 2, 3, go. I'm sorry, web page, not video, but you can see here that the Moto G Power was a lot quicker at pulling up the web page. So it's still loading here on the Stylo 6. So we'll give it a second here to complete. But this really shows, how big of a difference we have with the processors and RAM and the performance that comes with it on both devices here. So in conclusion, which phone is the better choice? The Motorola Moto G Power or the LG Stylo 6? Now I'd say that the Moto G Power is better than the Stylo 6 in pretty much every way. The only advantage that the Stylo 6 gives you is that you're getting a bigger display and you're getting a stylus. But beyond that, everything about the Moto G Power is better. So if you really want a stylus, then go ahead and get the Stylo 6. I still think it's a good phone. There's definitely still a lot of room for improvement, but it's not a terrible phone, but the Moto G Power is actually a very good phone. So I would go for the Moto G Power over the Stylo 6. But I hope you enjoyed this comparison between these two devices. If you liked it, let me know in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video.